System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, March 18th. I am Amin TMK alongside Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Emoja, hello.
Yo.
Let's just dive right on in. Let's talk about first. It looks as if one of the Houthis have claimed an attack on a U.S. naval vessel. This is the USS Harry Truman and its accompanying warships, because we know it's not just one aircraft carrier over there. We then see as many as 32 people have been killed, for bombing U.S. fighter jets, bombing Yemen. I think that's at about 52 from what I last looked, but it says 32 here. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, let's inform our listeners that the Houthis, who we should all be familiar with, I've went back to blockading the Red Sea. This is because Israel has again started its bombardment of Gaza. Another 100 people killed in this G-side in Gaza. What are your thoughts on this? What can you tell us about this, about both Palestine and the Houthis?
I mean, China came out and critiqued this, right? Because they're like, the Houthis are trying to uphold international law, right? They specifically said they were not going to begin the blockade of the Red Sea again. But then Israel broke the terms of the ceasefire. This is before they started literally bombing everyone. They killed over 400 people last night, by my last estimation. And that's in addition to, like you said, the figures I'm seeing are like over 50 Houthis were killed and over 100 were injured, including they blew up a cancer center. That was what the Americans did. But again, the Houthis wouldn't have even done this, according to what they're saying, right? If you take them at face value, except for the fact that Israel was breaking the terms of the ceasefire, but not allowing critical aid to get in. So you're starving people, which is a war crime. And everybody talks about this. What's funny is Trump talked about this back in 2020. It's like, oh, there go Biden bombing Yemen again. His poll numbers must be low. And now here he is on the same thing. But the reality is, every American president has bombed the Houthis, going all the way back to George W. Bush. And that's a crazy thing, right? You're talking about a country, by terms of GDP, is one of the poorest countries in the world. But I think what you start to find is it works for them in much the same way that this worked for the Afghanistan cause, right? When the American way of war is blow you to the stone, take away power, take away electricity, get rid of the comfort of life, to the point where the citizens themselves are like, yo, this shit got to stop. And then they, help Maidan their government, which is normally what the goal is, right? That's why it was easy to get rid of Saddam. They had a pretty high standard of living in Iraq. So once you take away the power, you take away the air conditioning, all of the little creature comforts of life, now it's like, fuck Saddam, brah. But it didn't work in Afghanistan because motherfuckers is already living kind of a tribal life already. You know what I'm saying? A rural kind of life. Agrarian almost even, right? That's where you are with the Houthis, the Ansarallah people. I mean, they live in the mountains and the deserts. I mean, they like the real life Fremen, but they on the ocean. They got the desert and they got the sea, so they the sea Fremen.
Yeah. You think of Afghanistan, the Afghani fighters, being in those mountains. There really was not much that the Marines could do, and it's very difficult, and the official Yemenese government really can't do much to stop them, like you said.
I would say the recognized.
That's fair. That's a great point.
They're in a civil war, which the recognized government is losing and has been losing for quite some time. They probably would have already lost all the way, except there was a ceasefire that came to be about a year ago. that was kind of brokered by the Chinese and the Iranians, where there were, they created a détente between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia was the de facto benefactors of the recognized government. And the Iranians are rumored to be the benefactors of Ansar Allah. You know what I'm saying? So once the Chinese engineered that civil war was put on pause. But who the official government is, when Ansar Allah goes out into the cities, and they got 1 million people out there with them, they probably the real government. You know what I'm saying? I never see 1 million people out there with the officially recognized government. But what's fascinating to me about those people is they doing this simply for skin folk, for the pride of Arab culture, and they're like the last of the wild boy Arabs, MBS about that money. And, Saudi Arabia nowadays is the kind of place you go to see boxing extravaganzas, right? They don't want to fuck up the money. Wars fuck up the money. No one
which was the reason why this whole ceasefire began in Yemen, because let's not forget that there were these, Saudi oil pipelines that were being hit by the Houthis. And again, this was the United States sort of gassing up, putting the battery in the back of MBS and the Saudis to be like, hey, these Houthis, these, Yemenis, the fighters have been a pain in your neck for quite some time. Let's get them. And they realized that didn't work.
And we got these F-16s to sell you, too. We're going to make it easy for you. We got the latest Patriot system. We get you plugged in. Look.
Where have you heard this before?
Right? It's it's the same bitch. And everyone falls for it because it's this level of... It means that we made it, right? There's this level of we made it when the United States is willing to sell you weapons, which there's all kinds of countries they still won't. We got Tulsi Gabbard in India right now trying to patch, I'm not trying to get too deep into that, but like trying to patch things up and, kind of poach India away from BRICS, we'll sell you this, we'll sell you that. Look at the F-35s. But for a long time, the Americans didn't sell Indians military tech. So where they had to go? Russia,
Yeah.
And so that, so they're like, it's always been this big pride thing when America sells you their weapons, because American weapons are supposed to be the best. We finding out the limitation of American military technology in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, it's like getting a Nike deal, you think, or a Jordan deal. You thought that's what you wanted and it was going to be all good, but it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. You mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. So let's stay there. We remember Tulsi Gabbard when she was, what is the thing where they have to go through Congress and get approved, congressional approval. Confirmation, there you go. Going through confirmation, she, mentioned HTS, and she mentioned al-Julani, and she mentioned, that the United States sort of helps bring about these terrorist entities through, dark funding or whatever that may be. And you mentioned her now, now that she's in India, she's talking about more countries should join the United States in bombing Yemen. And it's so interesting to see how, she tried to, I don't want to say play anti-war, that's not what I'm saying, but at least calling out the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of HTS and al-Julani and the current Syrian government. But now that she is fully here with Donald Trump, she's now going and saying, well, I think more countries, our country and other countries, should not be in a position to reroute commerce going through, the Red Sea because of the threat that exists. And, that's what she's saying, telling, this broadcaster in India. And, it looks as if, the whole anti-war thing again. And I'll just I ask you about this, too, because, Donald Trump was supposed to be this anti-war candidate. And we're now seeing, the bombardment of Gaza. We're now seeing this here in Yemen. The copium for the anti-war Trump people, I think, is like at an all-time high now. Right.
Yeah, this is what I would say, because I believe like in their mind, they don't even see these as contradictory traditions. Tulsi Gabbard appeals to whiteness, right? She's not quite white. She's mostly white, but she appeals to whiteness. She applies to whiteness. And Donald Trump is exactly that. I mean, he's, what was the ambassador of the South African government who was recently declared persona non grata, an ambassador got kicked out, the ambassador of South Africa. He said that Trump has white nationalist tendencies, and they kicked his ass out of the country, right? This is the thing, and that's the key to it all. Trump doesn't want to see white nations fight. This is why he worked so hard to stop this European war against Ukraine. Try so hard. I mean, you still got Masters and, Boeing got to get their cut. Raytheon got to get their cut. As soon as there was any type of delay to any type of intel gathering, sharing with Ukraine, any weapon distributing, they immediately bombed Yemen because the spice must flow. And normally I use that as a phrase to mean the oil got to go. But also in this context, it means the weapons manufacturers must get their cut. It's exactly like Eisenhower said. The military-industrial complex refuses to have their quarterly earnings damaged by anyone, much less a president. So if you're going to cut this Ukraine shit off, you better have something else ready to go. And once again, Yemen is the clever, evil, what do you call them, pirates and mobsters? I mean, what? But I tell you what. One thing he hasn't talked about at all is boots on the ground. No boots on the ground conversation at all. We'll fly over them, drop some bombs, blow up some civilians, and get the fuck. But look at this, right? When we're talking about them, they're rumored to have, over the last day, and I've been trying to get information on this, the only thing I can find is the Ansarallah resistance group fired up to 18, ballistic missiles and drones at the Harry Truman, right? It's reported to have retreated almost 1,000 kilometers away from the battle space. They're not saying whether it got hit or not, but you got to understand, this is a dangerous game in this way. What you've got, we talked about this before, what you've got on ship is what you've got, right? Until you go back to port and re-up and rearm and all that, what you've got is what you've got. So if they're firing all this stuff and you're using your missile, your anti-surface missile, point defense, Aegis, all of that, every bullet you fire, every missile you fire to take these drones out of the air to down these missiles, that's that much less you have, And the embarrassment that the United States will obtain should they lose a military vessel like an aircraft carrier, it just would be it'd be very difficult to deal with. So if there's any type of danger that happens at all, they move back. There is also rumors, that the attack fleet that was bombing Yemen at the time was forced to turn and return to the aircraft carrier because the aircraft carrier had to get the fuck. Again, though, and this is just Tanky's tactics, I want to say, I don't think that's going to work, right? Everybody's celebrating this, right? But at the end of the day, no ships were downed. You've expended weapons. Just like we're talking about with the United States Navy, there's only so many of these things that Ansarallah has to have. There's a finite amount. And everything can't be a demonstration or shot across the bow.
They're doing what Israel's doing.
They're making the mistake that Lebanon made, I would say. Nobody really wants to go to war with the United States. But, you can't play with it. Because, and now we're at the point where the president has said, every missile, every attack that comes from Ansarallah, he's going to put that on Iran. So once again, they're ramping up in a major way to make the Iran war happen. And, there were reports, over the last 48 hours, the Iranian missile defense forces, they had themselves at the highest level of readiness, right? Because even they were expecting it. At this point, it's a coin flip as to whether, I feel like we're closer to the Iran war happening than it ever has been. Because the president is putting it out there like that.
Yeah, they're looking for a casus belli, and that's what this is. He said, you mentioned this earlier, let nobody be fooled, the hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran. So that's that casus belli that you're looking for. And, you know, I think Iran is at this point now where they've already said it, like, do what you're going to do. And I think that they're ramping up. I was saying that America's acting like Israel in this regard because the 53 people that have been killed, and then the numbers are going to change. Obviously, the situation is fluid.
Right.
Over 100, you know, I think you said you heard her. Or anyway, 53 is the number that I'm seeing. Women and children, civilians among those that are dead. So that's what I mean when I say that they're just interacting sort of like Israel. And again, this is what the Obama administration did as well. You know, the drones, you know, every Monday, you know,
right.
he was going in, you know, the war room and deciding, you know, what quote unquote terrorists, you know, they were going to hit. And you had situations where these drones were blowing up at weddings and things of that nature, killing, you know, regular people, killing individuals that, you know, weren't affiliated. You know, they just may have been a friend of a cousin or something of that nature, which radicalizes people. Yeah. So now you have the same thing happening in Yemen. You know, obviously, what's happening in Gaza is a bit different, but in the same situation, you know, we talk about Ukraine. You know, they're looking to kill civilians because that is what terrorism is about. Like you said, they're trying to destabilize Yemen so the people rise up and say, hey, we don't want this. Like same thing that they want in Venezuela, the same thing that they want in Bolivia, the same thing that they want in Colombia and Chile and all of these different countries. If we blockade you and we make sure that your citizens' lives are terrible, you know, they're going to turn against you. But often that doesn't happen. And we're seeing that with the Houthis. I want to ask you, let's switch a little bit. I mentioned Ukraine. Let's talk about this. It's a little funny little saying now, coalition of the willing.
Where have we heard that before?
It's so funny how they continue to reuse these phrases that are steeped in other context is all I'll say. Now, I've been calling him Ken Starmer. His name is Keir Starmer. I think it's a weird name. I think British names are a bit weird. And if you have a problem, you know, you can see me in the streets, all right, unless your name is Tom Aspinall. Other than that, yeah, Keir is a weird name. So Keir Starmer, you know, calling this the coalition of the willing. Dozens of military chiefs from allies of Ukraine are due to meet in UK on Thursday, which I believe is in 2 days. It's going to be, you know, the greatest, the greatest hits. I'm sure Macron is going to be there. You know, lots of other people. It looks as if, you know, we've been talking about this. If the United States is going to pivot away from Ukraine, or at least in terms of funding and being a part of that, they obviously want that to end. At least that's what Donald Trump is saying. The UK is just ramping it up here again. Kaja Kallas, the EU Foreign Affairs chief, also there. You know, they're talking about the, you know, UK EU relations, but, you know, obviously this is about Moscow. This is about Russia. This is about Ukraine. What have you heard from this? What are your thoughts on this? Yeah.
So this is a traditional United States trap, right? If you look at World War I, France and Britain went to war with Germany. And they went to war with Germany, and they went to war with Germany, and they started losing. And then the Lusitania got sunk, which, by the way, was secretly shipping military weapons from the United States to support the British and to support the French. But it was supposed to be a luxury liner. At the time, they played it like a big deal. Like, oh, my God, the German U-boats, they sunk a passenger liner. Even though they knew, you know, it's just classified. They couldn't admit it. But what happened after that? United States gets in a war, right? World War II. Germany goes to war. They attack France. They attack, you know, Britain. They let them fight it out. And we get our another casus belli, you know, Pearl Harbor, which, oh, my God, that don't have shit to do with the fucking Germans at all. But now the Americans are involved in the war, right? That's their pattern. And now they're going to try that pattern against Russia. It's what it looks like to me, right? So they're acting like they're disentangling themselves from the Ukrainian resistance and that struggle, and they're inviting the Brits and the French to take on Russia, right? And when it goes bad, the Americans will inevitably jump in, but they don't want to, right? They would rather this be, and this is literally what the Secretary of Defense, I cannot remember.
Hegseth.
Hegseth. I keep wanting to say Hegsworth. Hegseth.
I think we changed it to Hegsworth.
Right.
We have the power to change the name.
We should, right? I mean, it's a corny ass name anyway. Right, so Hegseth, he challenged, along with J.D. Vance, the Europeans to up their military spending so that they can handle some problems. Again, to the Americans, like, damn, can you handle anything? We have to do our own things. We can't save you all the time, right? But they will. But that, again, it's not like there's some great peace movement that was happening with that. They want the freedom to disentangle from the Ukrainian conflict without fear that it will immediately fall in their absence so that they can focus on Iran, secure this whole thing with Israel, and then move on to China like they want to. It's impossible to see it as anything other than that, right? Like, that's what all of the motion is. Yeah. And they're like, the reason why you need our help is because y'all want to have all of these luxuries for your citizens. Imagine that being the pitch, right? But if you repeal that shit, which again makes it works for the Americans, because the Americans can't let people be seeing how people live in Europe, while you're working 70 hours a week, 3 jobs, you never see your kids. Meanwhile, you're hearing about siestas in Spain where people come home from their job, take a little napski-wapski, go out and party for a little bit. And then go back to work for an hour or two. Like, the American the companies in America, which represent the government.
Maternal leave,
Right.
That some people get that. Here in America, that you pop out a baby. Right back to work, baby.
Right. So they're like, if you start covering all these social services, you maybe could afford to have a real fucking army, and we won't have to bail your ass out all the time, right? That's literally where their mind is on that. And so that's where we're at. So now with Keir Starmer, right, he has this secret Zoom meeting with all of these other countries. So there's like 27 countries in the chat. The names still haven't been listed, by the way. He's bringing back his whole coalition of the willing, which was originally done with Bush when they invaded Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, right? So allegedly, supposed to have 30 countries that have signed on that are going to bring a peacekeeping troop to Ukraine. Now, I ask you this, several questions. One, how can you keep the peace when your countries are not peaceful with Russia and you claim to be allied to Ukraine? So that's already a misnomer, right? Like, we're not talking about, like, 30,000 Mexican troops or Chinese troops.
If me and you are having a fight, a big fight, right? A physical, we getting into it, it's really bad. And a peacekeeper comes and they try to, break up the fight. Well, I'm going to just fight you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the fight ain't getting broke up.
If that peacekeeper is my man's, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm here to keep the peace. Nah, you here to keep me from stomping your little man's out.
Your man's out, right. That's a fact. But this is, look, bro, this is the thing that constantly is happening with the United States and Europe. They think they're calling the shots, but they're not. And no matter what they do, they continue to create a narrative where they're the ones that are saying we should get a ceasefire. They're the ones that are saying here is what the plan is, but they're not in the driver's seat. Even Donnie J told Zelensky, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. Well, America doesn't have the cards either.
Right. Where's this peacekeeping troop as it relates to Israel? Why aren't the Europeans putting 30,000 people between the Israeli government's military and Lebanon, or between them and the people in Gaza? So you already know that's a little fishy. And Medvedev has straight up said, along with Putin, along with Lavrov, along with pretty much everybody in the Russian government. That's the most important people that is in the Russian government. Yeah. Forget what you heard. Those are the big three. Yeah, it's a non-starter. If you send these people to us, we're going to kill them. And so the number that we have is less than 30,000. I mean, almost that many people died in Kursk last week. I mean,
And we didn't even talk about Kursk because Kursk is over.
It's over.
We watched the map yesterday, and
it was over.
For months. There was very little movement, and then the Russian troops went in that underground Mario tunnels, okay,
man,
and they popped out on
that ass.
Yeah, and they ended that little Kursk situation. So that's over.
Man.
Their little negotiating tactic, their little negotiating prize, that is done. That is over with. So if you are planning on using that, and the Ukrainians went back to hitting civilian targets or energy targets. I think they hit like an energy field, like an oil field or something like that. Mm-hmm. Someone ended up dying. It was a ton of damage. Yeah. Again, not hurting the war machine. It's just terrorism.
Again, the irony of all of this is if the Ukrainians had never turned off the oil flow, that entire exploit that the Russians used wouldn't have even been possible.
And they probably were planning it. They were like, look, this is what's going to happen. They're going to shut this oil down and we will be ready. I mean, that's just what happens. I mean, I hate to be cliche, but I mean, in a lot of ways, Ukraine is playing checkers.
Yeah.
And Russia is, I don't know that much about chess, but I think the Russians are good at chess. Yeah, they got a few
world champions. Yeah.
Yeah, they got a few grandmasters, right? So. Yeah.
Even Kasparov, who tries to hate Russia all the time from Russia, hey man, that op check is compelling. Apparently.
Man, there it is.
That was the rumor. I mean, that's the thing that people are saying, right? Is the Americans, when it comes to geopolitics, play poker, and the Russians play chess.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yep.
Sooner or later, either you got the hand or you don't got the hand. If you don't got the hand,
Trump
you bluff. Right.
You don't got the cards.
You don't get the cards.
You don't get the cards. Yeah, let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, all those good things. Y'all, we got a Patreon. Our Patreon is going crazy. We have a beautiful community there. We're just starting, more discussions. Please get involved. We have free subscriptions as well, but I do want to give a shout out to our active patrons: Andrew Hobgood, got a S. Luke H, J, Let's, Incognigrita, History Will Absolve Me, Sophia San Marco, Kate Sauer, Monica Marciel, Laura Joel, Nikki Infield, Not the Rat, Lucy Newman, Samantha Guerrero, Dumpy, Tom L, W22, Jay Gallart 94, No Ground RK, Paula Lapata Lisa Pierce C, Lauren Bullock, Suzette Tav, Dennis Amadeus, Yada Real Heroes. It's growing, man. It's getting bigger. It's getting more communal and a lot of positive things happening. I really appreciate y'all.
It's important to share this news, y'all. It's important. That's the thing, man. For so long, everybody made fun of Fox News. The conservatives make fun of it too. That's why they created their own alternative media. When you look at this, all of the biggest people are right-wing people. Candace Owens, Joe
Rogan, Jordan Peterson.
You know what I'm saying? The left has to build these things, and y'all are helping us do that.
Yep.
We're going to keep bringing y'all this knowledge. Man, share this knowledge, absorb this knowledge, reflect it in your praxis. Don't be out there talking about, oh my God, the Uyghurs, 7 years in Tibet. We got to be smarter than that, y'all.
Yeah, don't be falling for the BS, please. I mean, that's why we're here trying. People are like, hey, do you have any resources for this, that, and the third? And I'm like, I do a broadcast
twice a week, most of the time.
It's a Mojo or other people involved, and that you guys can utilize that to understand the current context of what's happening. I put in a lot of work of research, and Amoja I know you put in even more. We were discussing. It's not like we've taken any of this lightly. It's our passion. It's what we love, and it's what we've decided to, further our careers as, Even though, I just want to say this, tomorrow we are releasing a new song. If you're into rap music and, you want to give us a listen, check out None N-U-N. It's dropping tomorrow. Is this the rapper look?
Yes, I had it with the baby fingers.
If you know, you know. Okay. Anyway, lots of plugs out the way. Thoughts? Anything we missed, Tanky?
Hey man, head on a swivel, because once again, here we go. The peace president has spoken, so it must be war.
It must be war. God wills it. For Emotional Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace. System riding to the core. Yeah.
Reppin' Inner City Left.